I'm so I'm so pleased to welcome you to the panel on Latinx and international student mentoring. Today, as international grad students, we want to discuss how to the mentoring and how can we express our thoughts and feelings about this kind of relationships and how culture can influence these academic relationships. So for that, our moderator, Lucía Medina, will ask some questions to our panelists. Lucia is a Cambio Center student fellow, and she's currently pursuing a master's degree in educational psychology. So thank you all of you again for being here, and go ahead, Lucia.
Thank you, Andres. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the panel on mentoring Latinx and international graduate students. The panelists for this event are Dr. Corinne Valdivia and Dr. Mary Stegmaier. Unfortunately, Dr. Lisa Flores will not be able to join us today. However, our panelists have some Dr. Flores notes regarding the different topics for our panel. So, Dr. Flores is a professor in the Department of Psychological Science at the University of Missouri. She has been a member of the Cambio Center Executive Board since 2010. Dr. Flores' research aims to understand the impact of psychosocial, cultural, and contextual variables on the education decisions and satisfaction of Latinx in engineering. Dr. Corinne Valdivia is a professor of agricultural and applied economics in the Division of Applied Social Science at MISU. She teaches graduate and undergraduate courses in international agricultural development. She mentors graduate students and directs the graduate school interdisciplinary international development minor. Her research focuses on how people and communities adapt to transformational changes brought about by globalization, innovations, climate change, and migration in East Africa, Latin America, and rural communities of the Midwest. Dr. Valdivia is founding fellow of Cambio Center and the Cambio de Colores Conference at the University of Missouri. Hi, Dr. Valdivia. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Hi. Hi, and thank you for the introduction, Lucia. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity also to be on this panel, although I've always think that I don't have the experience in professional experience, like, for example, Dr. Lisa Flores does in this theme. But I'll try to build a little bit of what I've learned from my experience working with communities, both in developing countries as well as in the US, and mentoring students from all over the world. I've been lucky at MU to be able to work with students that come from Asia, Africa, Latin America, and everyone has enriched the program that we have in terms of working with communities and making sure that our knowledge can have an impact in their livelihoods. So basically, one of the things that I've learned, and I'll talk a little bit about what I've done so that you can see where I'm coming from. The research that I do is interdisciplinary and translational. So basically it's working with different groups that have different cultures in order to figure out ways of finding knowledge and practice that can help adapting to different types of changes. So in the particular case of Africa, we work with national organizations that focus on research and extension, as well as local communities in rural areas that are pretty vulnerable to many of the climate changes and global market changes. So we're talking about communities that have different cultures within just Kenya as an example. And at the same time, the culture of the institution of a national organization that also has a culture and a very vertical culture sometimes in terms of authority. So learning about those is really key in order to be able to be effective when we're trying to learn and collaborate and grow. Similar case in Andean communities in South America. We've been working with communities since the 1990s, and we've gone from doing disciplinary and multidisciplinary research to interdisciplinary research, collaborative and transdisciplinary research. So what we're doing is actually learning of the culture of the different disciplines, which are very different as well, and finding ways of working together to create new knowledge, but also with the decision makers, the local decision makers that ultimately are the ones that will benefit from this knowledge. In similar ways is how we work at MU with our students. Every student that comes to our division brings a whole set of assets in terms of their culture, their knowledge, their values and institutions. And in that way, really what we've learned is that we cannot make a simplifying assumption that everybody's the same. We need to understand what are our strengths and what are the areas in which we can learn from each other in order to be effective. And that's the approach that I take on mentoring as well, my graduate and undergraduate students, in terms of really learning from each other, learning your strengths, and as a faculty member, also advocating for change in order for people to be able to work effectively, students in particular to work effectively on campus. So that's where I'm coming from in terms of thinking about mentoring and how I mentor students and how the lessons learned by going with students to the field and working in those communities, and the whole process of learning by collaborating changes them and us at the same time. So it's an intercultural process and an acculturation process, which is something that Dr. Lisa Flores would talk about, because one of the things that we've done in Cambio Center as a Center for Research and Outreach is also that understanding of culture, acculturation, and how the context in which we are, be it the university and the climate of the university or the climate of the state, or in general, the political climate, how those elements impact the way we interact with each other. So that's my brief introduction.
And thank you so much, Dr. Valdivia. That's so powerful, and thanks for being here. Well, Dr. Mary Stegmaier serves as the Vice Provost for International Programs at the University of Missouri, and she is an Associate Professor in the Truman School of Public Affairs. As a comparative politics scholar, she has spent extensive time conducting research on elections and voting behavior in Central and Eastern Europe. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Stegmaier.
Thank you so much for the introduction. And I also want to say thank you to the Cambio Center for organizing this conversation about mentoring international students and Latinx students in the Mizzou community. It's been fun over the past few days as I've thought about the process of mentoring students and thinking through concretely, like, do I mentor international students differently than I mentor American students? And as I've thought about this and reflected on it, I thought back to my own experiences as a new graduate student at the University of Iowa. And some background about me, I grew up in a small town, 6,000 people, so rural, went to a small size high school where everyone knew each other and we all knew each other's parents. And I also went to a liberal arts college with about 2,000 students. So going to a large university for me, it was exciting, it was new, but it was a bit intimidating, right? There were so many people, more professors in the political science department than just the two that I had in my department where I went as an undergrad. And I knew some things about graduate school, but I didn't fully understand or appreciate like the research component or some of the important things that happen in the first year experience that set you up for greater success down the road in your graduate career and also your professional career. And in thinking through some of that, I also reflected a lot on I had a number of mentors in graduate school, or people who I would call mentors, faculty members who I'm still in touch with. But one of my professors who I met my second semester in graduate school, and who invited me later in that semester based on a paper I had written to work with him on a research project that eventually got published and started sort of our collaboration long ago. I mean, we started writing together, I guess, we could say in 1995, and we still write together. We have a project right now that we're working on. And I think back to the ways that he mentored me, helping me understand graduate school, helping me understand the profession and the things that I should be considering, like going to conferences first, then presenting at conferences, how to network. I can think back to being at a conference where I had just presented and he had attended my presentation. He introduced me to a few people at the end of my session. And then, as we walked out, he introduced me to other people. I remember riding the elevator, down to the lobby with him. So really, like, I wasn't thinking about it at the time, but he was very much helping me build my network, my professional network that I still, of course, rely on heavily today for opportunities as well as guidance. So as I work with graduate students today, I think back to how he mentored me in being interested in me as a person, being interested in hearing what I wanted to study, interested in my feedback on some of his research that gave me a sense of what the research process was like, but then also giving me constructive feedback on conference papers and willing to listen to practice presentations that benefited me so much through my career still today. And so coming back to the topic of mentoring international students, while I wasn't an international student, I was also in some ways, maybe I felt like an outsider at a large university in a large department. And when I think about mentoring international students, recognizing that they have some distinct needs and concerns and challenges, but it's important to be interested in them as a person, what they want to do research in, but also listening to their experiences. Are they struggling in certain areas? What kind of advice might you give them? And making it not just me giving them advice, but engaging with them in sort of two-way feedback. Like, I appreciate getting advice on a draft of a paper from a smart graduate student who, can critique the research methods or the models that I have, or suggest some more recent publications to include. So my takeaway point here is, I think with any graduate student, an international student, a first-gen student, or a student who grew up in an academic family, one of the keys to successfully mentoring them is to be interested in them and also to be interested in their success. So I'll leave it at that. I know that there are a lot of questions that, that the audience will have, and that some that are also prepared for our discussion. Thank you.
No, thank you, Dr. Stegmaier, for your insights. You both bring so much expertise and various perspectives to this topic, so I am excited to dig in. So all questions will be asked for both of you, so please, Dr. Stegmaier and Dr. Valdivia, feel free to reply and complement each other. We also enhance to all the participants in this panel to share their questions and comments in the chat box here below on the Zoom screen. So, well, one of the ones I want to jump into, which is sort both a simple and complex question, is what does mentoring mean for you?
For me, mentoring means really getting to know the student that I'm going to be working with, what their goals are, what their aspirations are, where they are today, what they bring in terms of strengths, and what are the areas where they need more learning, for example. So really understanding not only who they are, where they're coming from, and looking at that, but at the same time thinking of what are their aspirations, where they want to be, what type of work do they want to be doing, where do they want to be next in the world, right? Because many decide that they want to do something international rather than domestic. Others want to do more domestic, domestic meaning the US in this case, want to actually go into academia or go to a research center. So really understanding where they're coming from before they come, really knowing their goals, their situation as well, so that I can become a little bit knowledgeable as well as about the culture that they bring to work with here. That's one of the things that's key, and that goes back to, I don't make any assumptions. I need to learn, and in order to be a good mentor, I need to understand what is, how to get to the point where my students want to get.
Yeah, so I think what Corinne just mentioned is excellent, right? It really encapsulates what mentoring is about. And I'll concur that really understanding the student that you're working with and where they're coming from, but where they want to go. For me, it's also about learning from the student as well as them learning from me. So I might see opportunities or know of opportunities that would enable the student to gain certain skills that would be useful down the road, or publishing opportunities, conference opportunities, data sets. So sharing information with them, but then also not just information, but opportunities that will help them move forward, like explaining doing this could help you with this, or help you build a network, or could lead to, developing some connections that could be potential jobs down the road. But then also, as I mentioned earlier, learning from them, because the students are in classrooms with my colleagues, learning new literature, new methodologies, also, new techniques. So they have things to share with me as well. So it is this give and take. And in some ways that's quite similar to any kind of collaboration, right? A co-authorship, a partnership. You have to get to the place where you're open with each other, you're comfortable and diplomatic in providing criticism, but you're also open to criticism, someone like taking out a whole section of a paper that no longer fits in, for example. And that kind of openness is imperative for a really successful mentoring relationship.
Yeah, thanks for that. Definitely, mentoring is the ideal for the relationship between graduate students and professors, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing in mentoring that I encourage, building on what Mary has mentioned, is making sure that as they come to MU, they know the value of their student organization, even within our division, to develop those relationships, to be aware of centers that are working on research in areas that they're interested in so that they can connect to them. And based on what they're interested in, actually connecting them to other faculty, because I think one of the realities is, like Mary's mentioning, I may not have all the skills, I may not have all the techniques or work in a certain area. So for me, it's really important that they feel that they're comfortable going to other faculty as well and working with other students, collaborating across that department, so that I think it's part of how you become somebody that feels that they belong, which is really important.
Yeah, of course, thank you. I also want to dig into experiences mentoring students from different cultures. So, is there a difference between mentoring American students and international students?
Probably there are. Oh, go ahead, Mary.
Okay, so I would say for me, the big difference is helping international students understand and fit into and be successful in the American academic environment. So some international students come from different academic environments and they aren't accustomed to, say, for example, seminars that we might have in the social sciences, where there's a lot of participation and critique of arguments made in the book or critiques of each other's arguments, or critiquing what the professor has said in class. This kind of debate is can be a new experience for some international students. Also, some international students may not feel comfortable initially going to office hours or approaching a faculty member with a question that they have, or maybe a problem that they're experiencing, based on the kind of relationship they would have with faculty in their home country. So some of that mentoring, at least initially for an international student, is helping them understand the academic environment and expectations at American universities, including at Mizzou, to be successful in graduate school, and helping them get over some of the anxiety or fear that they might have in doing that and engaging in that way.
Which resonates as well with what Lisa Flores was writing to us about in terms of understanding the culture of the student, in the educational culture of the student that's coming from other countries into the US as well. Mm-hmm. So yes, definitely.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me one of my academic culture shocks. That was when I realized that the education in the US is more informal and not hierarchical. I mean, compared to my Latino education, which is more formal and perhaps paternalistic. Yeah, that is sort of connecting to another question, which is, would you recommend an advisor from the same culture, or at least cultural knowledge from the same culture as the international student?
I would recommend a mentor that's the best fit for the student. So it may be from the same country or it may not be from the same country. It depends on what the student is looking for. And hopefully we can develop strategies for interculturalism that allow every faculty to be comfortable in mentoring students from different cultures. So not necessarily.
Okay.
I would agree with that. I think that at the graduate level, a student's mentor or a student should be seeking out a mentor who works in the same field that they're interested in, and who they feel like they can connect with and have a relationship with. Professionally down the road, it's really important to have a mentor who is in the field that you intend to write your dissertation on, or in the future have an academic or a non-academic research career working in that field, because that person has hopefully connections that will help you establish yourself as a young scholar. And also when you're on the job market, those connections are really, really important. And I have mentored a student who I ended up as his dissertation chair, who worked in an area very far from what I do. Like I've never done research in that area at all or anything close to it. And that happened because we had a faculty member leave or a couple faculty members leave and the student needed a chair. And it was all fine. Like, I could supervise his dissertation, but what I couldn't do is connect him easily with people in that field because I don't know anyone who works in that field. I know their names in the same way that that student knows their names from some of the research he was citing, but that I felt was sort of a detriment to him and I felt bad about it, but it's also not my field, right? So I could help make those connections, but I didn't have the relationships with senior colleagues in his field that I would in, say, comparative politics.
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing. And related to the previous, Andres? Yeah.
Yes, we have a question in the chat. One of our participants asked, as a mentor, how do you handle interpersonal communication difficulties and English language, reading proficiency issues with incoming students from non-Anglophone cultures, especially if you don't have sufficient proficiency in the incoming students' first language? Is this clear?
Yeah.
So now you want to, okay.
Well, in my case, I haven't been in that situation, but one of the points that Lisa Flores was indicating was really knowing about the resources that are available on campus that can support students that are having difficulties in that sense. And so there are many resources for that. And there are also trainings in the graduate school that are always opportunities for our students to learn. So that's one of the suggestions that she pointed out. It's for every faculty to be aware of all those resources in order to address those needs. And the similar with mental health issues, that sometimes because of the acculturation and what we call the cultural shock, which I came from Peru, so we all experience, it's really understanding how that can be expressed in other ways that you are not aware of because this is your first experience in a different context.
Yeah, that's true. I know that in the counseling center, there is a group focused on international students.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was thinking something related to the previous question. That is, Dr. Valdivia said that the sense of belonging is a human need. And the important point is that mentors help to overcome the feeling of alienation or loneliness. And I think either by sharing the same culture or helping to the student to integrate into the American culture? Well, now I want to switch a little bit, right? We've been talking about how to create better mentoring relationships, and it raised the need of international students for understanding graduate school in the American culture. So what aspects of the American culture should international students know?
I think maybe to start with, the way I would approach this is thinking about the specific discipline. So at the graduate level, I mean, here at Mizzou, all of our departments do excellent research, the faculty do excellent research, but the culture and the type of work differs across the departments. So there are different expectations in terms of classes, whether you're in seminars versus lab. And so understanding the culture of the department is important, but then understanding also how graduate school in general works. So engaging in some of the events that the graduate school hosts, the graduate professionals, the graduate and professional council. So the more that students are engaged, now of course they have to be studying, but if they are participating in these different kinds of events and taking advantage of opportunities on campus, they can have a better understanding of how the university works and how graduate school works and what the expectations are. So just to give you an example, earlier this week, there was the State of the University address, which I attended in person. And I was sitting initially by myself. A colleague had been sitting next to me, but had to get up. And someone sat down next to me, right next to me, who I didn't know. So I introduced myself, and that person happened to be a professional student on campus. And we struck up a conversation. He was coming from the East Coast. We had a colleague in common at his home institution. I had a chance to introduce him to a couple of other university leaders. And like now we're in touch. He's not in my field, but just by going to this event on campus to learn about the university in general, where President Choi was speaking, this student sort of by chance, but also maybe not exactly by chance, had an opportunity to meet a few of us and make connections. So all of those things I think are helpful in having a better understanding of how the university works and how graduate programs work. That is beneficial also down the road in careers that students will enter once they graduate.
Okay, we have another question in the chat. What is the approach of the university concerning inclusion and diversity, considering that those are topics that are related, but they are totally different? I don't know, Dr. Stegmaier, Dr. Valdivia.
I'm trying to understand the question. My thoughts
again,
on
do you want me to read again?
No. I'm
Fine?
just
Okay.
trying to. I'm just trying to connect to the idea of inclusion and the idea of diversity. My thoughts on diversity are obviously positive. The more diverse we are in terms of our student group, of our faculty, of the staff that work in the university, the better we are prepared for any change. That diversity means a lot of skill sets and a lot of connections that can, contribute to really adapting and growing and being resilient. That's true in the work that I do as well. Inclusion, for me, means actually that interculturalism, that acceptance, that understanding of the other and valuing the other. And I don't know that this is what the university has as a policy. It's my interpretation of what inclusion is and what diversity is. And they go hand in hand. I mean, if you are inclusive and bring in all these diverse group of people, all these diverse group of researchers, the bigger your ability to create new knowledge. And I think we are about that, creating new knowledge, skills, and practice that can impact society. So that's probably not exactly the question that that somebody was asking, but that's my take based on my experience.
I have a question related to that. Are there any strategies for creating an inclusive and diverse environment at MISO?
I want to believe that Cambio Center was one of those strategies. We created Cambio Center because there was a felt need. Many years back, our state was changing, our communities were changing, and we had no clue about what to do. So bringing in the skills, the faculty that were interested, the people that were interested but had no knowledge of what to do, but were willing to work together, and really starting to collaborate with the communities, which we did across the state, has created in many communities a welcoming mat, which means people feel that they belong. And the more you feel you belong, the more you can grow together. So that's for me, an example of a strategy for change that was important and needed at the time, and still is, actually.
Yeah, that's powerful. Thank you. Dr. Stegmaier, do you have some insight related to these questions?
Yes, I was also going to mention, and this is similar to what Corinne just mentioned, but beyond the Cambio Center, our international student organizations, there are many of them. It's really wonderful. I've attended a number of their events. So, you know, whether it is the Vietnamese Student Organization or the Chinese Student Association or the Afghan Student Association, which was just created. There's a whole range of these. There's also MISC, the Missouri International Student Council. They hold international events and cultural events. The Indian Cultural Association is another example. And these often, you know, involves food and a celebration of a particular holiday or some speakers. And to the extent that these are open to the broader community, it's a way for students to share their cultures with the rest of campus. And the more the rest of campus learns about any culture, the greater appreciation there is of that. And sometimes I think domestic students or faculty may feel like they don't know anything about a particular country where a student is from. And so then it's hard to ask questions, or they feel it's hard to ask questions because they might not know anything. And that can be a challenging situation for international students to find themselves in, because they want to share things, but it can sometimes come across as the other person not being interested when they might just not know what to ask. I'll also say that our Teaching for Learning Center has some programs for faculty and graduate teaching assistants that focus on different strategies for teaching, including teaching in a diverse classroom environment. So that's another way that we can think about inclusion in the classroom. And that's really when we have our students' attention. And so honoring and respecting different perspectives and encouraging different perspectives to be shared is an important part of the education process.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
And Raquel has a good, another good advice in terms of making sure that graduate students are international graduate students as well, seek opportunities to serve in communities on campus. I think that's something that can enrich actually those committees as well, and make them more aware of the diversity that we have at MU.
Yeah, of course, thank you. Well, regarding the whole graduate school process, I was wondering what kinds of skills do you expect international students to come into graduate school and which acquire during graduate school?
I think there are requirements at the graduate school, and we also have requirements in each one of their departments and divisions in terms of their proficiency in certain areas in their degrees in economics, or in our field, it has to do with microeconomics. And in general, those are set by each one of our departments, as well as the graduate school that sets the standards and does also the approvals. What I look for are students that are really interested in learning, that have a mission in life with regards to the field and how the field can contribute to that. Their maturity, in many cases, what experience they've had before, because navigating the system when you haven't had a lot of experience is going to be more difficult. But in general, we have committees that actually look at all those traits of the students to make sure that we know that they're going to be successful. Because the sad part of our work that we don't like, we don't want it to happen, is have somebody invested in coming and then realizing that this is not a good fit. And that's really sad. We don't want that to happen. But so really knowing about what the expectations of the program are, what the requirements are, asking questions to see if they are a good fit, are things that we always suggest to those that are applicants, to get the opportunity, now that we have Zoom, right? Get the opportunity to talk to faculty to see if that's really a good fit for them as well.
Yeah, great perspective. I think that graduate school is an experience that changed us, but not only academically, but also on a personal and cultural level. But I think that we have a question in the chat.
No, we don't have questions, but we encourage all of you, if you have comments, questions, concerns, just feel free to do it.
Maybe I'll just add to the last question that was asked. So I think one of the things that probably most faculty members look for in any student that they might be mentoring is, we like to work, and it's exciting to work with students who are intellectually curious, who are passionate and excited about the research that they're doing, or our own fields of study, if they want to be working with us, who are motivated, but then also who are willing to put in the time and the hard work. And this becomes apparent, like the excitement that a student has about what they want to do in the future, what they want to research, really comes across in the first 5 minutes that you're talking to the student. You can see the excitement in their eyes and in their expressions. But it sometimes happens that a student is really excited about something. They're excited about the idea, but then they're not actually motivated to do the hard work behind it, like the literature review, reading what's already been done on it, and coding data or running the analysis. That is hard work, right? And so we're also looking for students who recognize that the research process is challenging, and there are ups and downs, and it's rarely linear, but that they're willing to put in the time to sort of achieve their goals and to work well on the team.
Yeah, thank you, Dr.
I
Stegmaier.
had a follow-up question with that, because I had so much great experience with Vice Provost Stegmaier. I mean, she's a mentor for everybody. And one of my questions was basically, what can other groups do to help incorporate some relationships with the international programming? Because as a student, I remember working on a capstone project, and there were 3 guys, and we were pretty familiar with each other, and there were 2 international students, and some of the other 2 guys in my group were kind of dismayed by a lack of effort that they saw in the international students. And I had to kind of explain to them, being a minority myself, sometimes your aggressive personality kind of pushes people away. And what do you do to kind of incorporate people? So, I'm not going to make this a fairy tale. One person really wanted to interact, the other person didn't. But the fact is, one person wanted to interact, and he was kind of intimidated by the 3 of us being pretty aggressive and pretty driven. And it's kind of like we excluded his intellectual capacity, which he helped us greatly in the project by just not interacting. So what can we do to get more interaction between students, other administrators, and not just faculty?
Thank you, Sean. That's a really great question, and you've illustrated it well with your example. I think in group projects, group projects are often a challenge for students, and it's not only a challenge if you have an international student, but sometimes there is a domestic student who's just, a free rider and knows that the others will do good work. So the way I approach this when I have students doing group work, and to the extent that I can, I do try to mix the groups so that if I do have, international students, that they aren't just grouped together as a group of international students, but that they're integrated into other groups, is to talk in general to the class about the purpose of group projects, that in many fields, after students graduate, they will be working on group projects with colleagues as part of a team. And this is part of the learning process, to work with people who come to the project with different skills, with different competencies, and different comfort levels in expressing their ideas. And that it's incumbent on everyone in the group to make sure that people feel part of the team. So I'm sorry to hear about that particular experience, but perhaps in that situation, some different or more framing of the purpose of the project and the kinds of things that you expect students to gain from that group project experience, aside from just producing a research project.
And to kind of piggyback on that, I think something that would actually help too, professors know groups that are already groups, and they know when they're integrating students that maybe as a professor, sometimes if you know there are people who are already in a group and you're gonna add people to the group, maybe the professor should meet with those groups and explain expectations and explain, hey, we have 5 people on the team. We can't just have 3 people, because if you're playing basketball, 3 against 5 loses all the time. So we have to focus on being a team effort and incorporating each other's strengths. So I think that would be a good idea with international students and students that have some free riding, because as I said, there was one student who was extremely productive and engaged, and the other, this is life. You're not, just like you said, general American students, they're going to be free riders too. So, and there are several groups that were free riders, but we have to make sure that we're reaching out to every type of, and I consider international students as a minority here in the United States, that we're reaching out just like everyone would look for outreach programs to everyone and incorporate and make sure we're getting everybody's strengths and make sure we're working together on a project.
Yeah, Sean, thank you.
Thank you,
Totally.
Sean.
That's a great idea.
We got another question here. What recommendations can you give to grad students that are having communication issues with their mentor or advisor?
Maybe it would be helpful to clarify what exactly communication issues means.
This is an anonymous question, but yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna ask for more clarifications.
Well, we can go with
Yeah.
another question. That is in terms of American academic community. Do faculty tend to co-author with their students, and is it frequent?
Yes. Most of the papers that I write are collaborations with students and with other colleagues around the world. So in my field, probably it's not as common, but because I work in issues like climate change and issues of innovation, it's really typical to have large groups of people collaborating, and my students are part of that process as well.
Great. I was wondering, is it okay if graduate students do a project with someone other than their advisors?
Yeah, that's not a problem, actually. I have students that work with other faculty. They have some skills and are interested in a topic that my student is interested in. And many of the PhD students have to write 3 papers as part of their dissertation. So the more diverse they have in terms of a committee and being able to write with other people is good.
Yeah, that's good to know, because even though—
But always ask. I think one of the things that you want to do is always ask. I'm talking about my experience, but yes,
yeah.
always. That's one of the things. Communicate with your advisor, work with your advisor, and brainstorm with your advisor about ideas that you have as well. And two things that Lisa Flores was mentioning that's important for all of us to do is to develop cross-cultural competencies. Really not being afraid to try to pronounce somebody else's name that's different from what you're. So if you put in front of me a Spanish name, I can speak it very easily. When it's in English, it's okay. German maybe, but then there are other languages that are very difficult to pronounce, and therefore you basically feel comfortable in asking. The same with me. Please ask me. I don't have a problem with that. And feeling comfortable in that way, I think it's being approachable in either direction is really important in building those connections.
Yeah, that's great. Go ahead, Andres.
Yes, when we mention this kind of communication issues, we refer to grad students that don't know the expectations of their mentor or advisor, or students who are shy or nervous about sharing their ideas or have comments. Yep. What do you suggest, or what recommendations can you give to this kind of students? It happened to me, I think. Yeah.
Well, but that's an important point. I mean, if you're not sure, talk to your faculty advisor. What is it that I'm supposed to be doing? Because we now do all these effort verifications for our students and their evaluations at the end of the year. So there should be a clear plan of what they're going to be doing during the year. But also this opportunity to talk and feel comfortable talking to your advisor. And sometimes, like you say, we're shy, right? When I came from Peru, I was very independent. I did everything myself. I never asked my advisor, and probably I would have been better off if I said, okay, I do need you to advise me rather than me figuring everything on my own. So
I would also say, to answer that about the communication issue, maybe as you just described it, it also may be extended into the classroom if they were shy in class. And I think talking to the faculty member in that class, if it's important that you be contributing to the discussion and you're having difficulty with this, letting the instructor know, and that instructor can probably give you a couple of questions that they typically start the discussion with, right? So if I have students that are discussing an article, I would typically start with the question, who would like to provide a summary of, like a short summary, so that we're all on the same page? The next question might be, what did you all think about this article? What did you think about the argument? What did you think about the methods? That can help a student prepare for the discussion, right? So I've had students in this situation, and sometimes I can give them more concrete questions about, here are the questions, my discussion questions that I will ask next time in class. But if they have an opportunity a couple of times to prepare an answer, even writing out an answer in advance, and I know that students having difficulty participating, if they've prepared something, I can call on them first in class, and they have the chance then to share what they're thinking. And if they're struggling a little bit with English and keeping up with the discussion, that can help them build confidence and having a voice. Sometimes also sitting near the front of the class, depending on the design of the classroom, can be less intimidating, because then it doesn't seem like you're talking to such a large group of people, that you're talking more to me as the instructor.
Yeah, thank you so much. And
I think that relates also to another comment that Lisa Flores made in terms of cross-cultural competencies, and it goes both ways. So more opportunities for our faculty also in terms of training to learn about how to work with international students, I think is important, especially when you come from societies where there's more of this respect, where you defer to the elder, which happened to me as well. So those, knowing about that, being aware of that as a faculty member is really important in order to facilitate a classroom that really is inviting to everybody. So it's also not only what the student can do, but what we need to do as faculty members in order to help that type of issues, actually.
Yeah, perfect, Dr. Valdivia. And with that, I want to thank you, our panelists.
Sorry. I have a last question here, quick question, just before closing.
Okay.
In the last State of the Union, Professor Choi said that he wants to hire more faculty. So could we expect that more Latinx faculty will be hired in a near future?
I hope so.
We hope so too, yeah.
Yeah, I think that the more, again, diversity is a value and an asset to our university. And you can see it in all the contributions that Latinos and other groups are making to this university today. So hopefully, yes.
Crossing fingers, yep. So go ahead, Lucia, before the closing.
Yeah, of course. Thank you to our panelists, and thanks to all the participants in this panel for this really rich conversation. I feel that we could talk for hours and hours about these topics, but our time has finished, so thank you.
Unfortunately, yeah, the time is short.
Thank you, Lucia. Thank you, Andres.
And yeah, no, we would like to thank you, Dr. Stegmaier, Dr. Valdivia, of course, Lucia, thank you so much. Also, Dr. Aroca, for your comments in the chat. They were so important. And thank you to all of you for participating and just let us know your questions. Finally, we also want to remind you to register for the 20th Cambio de Colores conference. Is coming soon in June, 22nd. So the topic of the conference is Floreciendo, is resilience and changing communities in uncertain times. So we hope to see you, all of you there. And okay, keep in touch and see you in our next event. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
So much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Bye.